He managed billions on Wall Street, burned out, and quit cold turkey after 9/11. Left behind the trading floor, the bonuses, and the rock star lifestyle. He moved his family to Boulder with no plan, no food experience, and invented a category that didn't even exist yet.
So it actually came from a couple of fronts. Health food for kids, and I had 2 little kids, was a hot dog, grilled cheese, chicken nuggets. They were staples. There was no one focused on health and wellness. And even when I was in college, it always bothered me that there was no really health food for college kids. And I had a buddy living in Tucson that started a smoothie company. And within that smoothie company, he was a really talented marketing guy. And I was all about texture, meals, and really enjoy all the freshness and the flavors.
22 years later, Rush Bowls is in 25 states. This is Andrew. All right, welcome back to another episode of How I Franchise This. Andrew, I'm incredibly grateful that you're here with us today. You have worked for 15 years, managing institutional bets. You uprooted your family and moved to Boulder to invent a category that did not exist yet. You're the pioneer behind the meal in a bowl standard. Give us the snapshot of that, that transition from the trading floor to the mad science of building Rush Bowls into a national standard. So why don't we start with, again, a quick intro of the brand and what's some of that initial origin story?
First, it's great to be on your show. I'm super excited to be here. It's an incredible show. I've been watching it for a long time. My story is that, I am the founder and CEO of Rush Bowls. I founded the company in 2004, and I've been with the company, obviously, for almost 22 years now, which is super exciting and super long time. And before that, I was global head of derivative fixed income trading, and I worked my way up to that. And actually, my origin started a middle-class family in Long Island, as they say. My dad was a lawyer and a judge, and my mom was pretty intellectual person, but she was a pretty stay-at-home mom. But at the dinner table was always Q&A. So I think with my other 3 siblings, and I'm the youngest of, it was always a lot of Q&A. And I think that really set the precedence to entrepreneurship, because neither of them were entrepreneurs, and most of my siblings are, and very successful at that. So I really think that Q&A really, and in-depth questions and why, that really helped us all kind of move forward. And go ahead.
I was going to say, something I've noticed, a trend or a consistent character trait in entrepreneurs is they're innately very curious. Do you think the Q&A at the dinner table led and sparked to yours and your siblings just general curiosity of the world, how things work, etc.? Do you think there's some, I guess, kind of initial inspiration there?
I think it was why. Don't take everything at face value. There's more to it. Everyone, and we all do it at certain levels. You take everything on the surface level, but you got to dig deeper to find the real answers, not conspiracy wise, but to really understand the why. And I think by asking those questions, inherently you're a better employee and a better entrepreneur. So I had some learning disabilities too. It was very hard for me to speak, honestly. The words would be fine in my brain, but to articulate them in the order. So I'm dyslexic, but oddly enough, numbers are home for me. I love numbers, and I love sequences, and it was my language more than English. So I always felt very comfortable in math and not very comfortable in English. And it was
you and Richard Branson. There's a lot of great dyslexic entrepreneurs.
So I always had to kind of figure out different verbiage than how I would normally articulate, because I couldn't get the words out appropriately. So that was always a challenge. I was going to be a doctor, or try to be a doctor, in college, and I was pre-med. And then my oldest brother, was doing extremely well in business. And I think kind of greed got to me a little bit. And I'm like, wow, I think I could do really, really well in business. And if you want to get into finance, the peak in finance at the time was really trading, and fixed income trading was, you were treated like a rock star. And how to get there wasn't easy, but once you got there, it was like a very different life. And that really drove me. And I worked at Bear Stearns, Morgan Stanley, Credit Lyonnais, and I was global head for National Australia Bank, all within that fixed income trading. I started at a basically I graduated in 87, 88 really, but I had all these job offers in 87 right at the crash. So a lot of them pulled the offers like Salomon Brothers and everything else. And then eventually I go into this in this manuscript I mentioned to you, but I got a few job offers. I was really lucky, but I had pretty good experience. And then Bear Stearns the company was young. It was kind of the aggressive company, and I always wanted to work for them. So I got into their management trainee program. And that really launched me into the world of high finance. So, it's funny. I think it came from desperation. So I was doing it for a long time. And, to do that job, you're a professional gambler. I'm taking the positions for the banks. And it's a very, very stressful job. Really, people they're not doing that job in their 30s and 40s realistically. It's incredible pressure. And like I said earlier, you're treated like a rock star, but like everything else, that's not reality. I felt once I got married and had kids, I was losing. The highs were lower and the lows were lower. So even though financially I was having better and better years, and it's very hard to trade for a really long time and do it very well. And I was lucky, I was pretty good at it. And I had this testament of time. But then 9/11 happens, and it really triggers all sorts of horrific feelings for us, for myself, my wife. My wife was in the tower in 93, the first time it was bombed. And she was working, I believe, at Cantor, or maybe it wasn't, like pretty high floor there. She got out. I didn't know her at the time, or wasn't dating her at the time. And then her first day back from maternity, she's in her 20s. We're living in Manhattan, and I'm in Midtown. And it shook our worlds. It really did. And a couple of good friends end up, jumping, because Cantor was a big interface broker for trades that we were doing, and most of the banks were doing. And I didn't want to raise my kids in New York City. In the back of my mind, I always wanted to live in Boulder, Colorado. I traveled out west a lot. I love the West. And basically said, I'm going to figure out a way to do this.
Why Boulder versus like Coeur d'Alene or anywhere else out west? What gravitated you towards Boulder?
So Boulder is kind of near. First of all, you're near a major airport. So Denver, I could fly anywhere in the world. I love to travel. And second of all, it's really outdoors year round. And has great schools, really good environment, and you're right part of a college town, which I kind of like being in a college town. So Boulder came first, even before Rush. So I was like, and even before I got married, I said, I really want to move to Boulder someday. And she's like, yeah, my wife. But I really did. So after 9/11 and living in the city, you had fear of anthrax and taping the windows and this and that. And I had a really, pretty good years. I just had enough. And I quit my job, which is unusual in the banking world. Like, wait, you're leaving? How dare you? So,
well, especially don't you have some of the kind of like, I don't want to say golden handcuffs, but a lot of the bonuses is deferred comp, and they'll do a year. I don't know if they were doing that at the time, but I know that's pretty prevalent today.
Limited.
Okay.
They were doing it. That's true now. They're a lot smarter about it. But I was burnt out. I think I would have, and I gave up a lot of money because they wanted me to stay, and I just didn't want to do it anymore.
Did you have a plan, or did you just quit cold turkey, like, I'm out, we're moving, or was there somewhat of a plan?
I wish I would have had a plan a little bit more. I didn't really have it as thought out as I probably should have. I was a little disappointed in like a few things, and I just didn't want to do it anymore. And I was just burnt out, and I just kind of impulsively said I was going to do it, which when you're in the trading world for as long as I was, that's not something you're trained to do, really. So I think it just reached a point that I needed to uplift myself and shake it all up to move on. And the one thing about in the trading world, it's very mine, yours, do this. When I say jump, you say how high. It's very dictatorial, and it's also very much quick. Like, you got to be on it, and very, very mathematical. Like, it's a little different than equity trading, which is kind of a different game. This is pretty white shoes and very, very mathematical. So I'm hedging with futures, I'm hedging with treasuries, I'm hedging in currencies. I'm taking massive positions for the banks for their portfolios. But I literally reached the point that I needed to do something else. And I was dying for social interaction. So I wanted to talk to people. I wanted to see people. And I felt that I was very caught in this world that I couldn't get out of. And I did. I bought a house and started a business and quit all at the same time, which is a little insane.
Yes, but I think it's such an admirable story. Like you said, oh, you wish you had more of a plan, but let's say you did, you might not be. Who knows what your world would look like now, and maybe being too structured or too rigid or too planned wouldn't have led to the outcome that you've had, at this point so far. And I appreciate the vulnerability too. Is like so many people I think listening are. I mean, I was not nearly as long as you, but I was in at Ernst and Young for a few years, and I could just tell the path that I was on was going to become increasingly soul crushing, just because the work wasn't mine. It wasn't as fulfilling. Um, the pressure, the stress, etc. And I think I knew at some point I was going to feel this way, and so why not get a head start and start doing something now? And good for you for listening to yourself and doing something about it. I think a lot of people never make the move and later regret it, or are currently listening and regret it right now. So I appreciate you sharing that. When you said, so you quit, you moved, you bought a house, you had this idea for Boulder, but then you said you started a business all at the same time. Where did the idea for the business come from? Was it a personal problem you had? Was it something you observed in the world and thought, hey, this could be done better? Or what sparked the business idea?
So it actually came from a couple of fronts. So in New York City, and we're going back, 20, 22 years, right? If not more,
Mhm.
right? Health food for kids, and I had two little kids, very little, was a hot dog, grilled cheese, chicken nuggets.
Jeez, the staples.
Like, they were staples. There was no one focused on health and wellness. And even when I was in college, it always bothered me that there was no really health food for college kids at all. And it wasn't in vogue yet, but I felt there was really, with Whole Foods coming along and other avenues, I felt there was an opportunity there that also would afford me interaction. And I had a buddy living in Tucson that started a smoothie company. And within that smoothie company, he was a really talented marketing guy, and I not really much of a business guy, I think. But I started talking to him for a bit. He gave me a lot of inspiration to start the company, but he also didn't want to do any bowls or anything like that. And I was all about texture, meals. I didn't want to do smoothies. I wanted to do meals that people could come, go, and really enjoy all the freshness and the flavors. And I want to focus on college kids because I knew they would be early adopters. If I did this in a much more mature community, I think it would have been a much harder go. It's hard enough, getting people to try it and getting into it. But in an older community, I think it would have been almost nearly impossible if it started there. Um,
Mhm.
so a lot of it was testing. A lot of it was, just talking to students. But texture was really, I'm a very texture. I like texture in my food. So it was a big
Mhm.
part of it. What's the right granola? What's the right honey? Acai was brand new at the time. How do I do it as a bowl? How do I, make these flavors? Because unlike a lot of companies aren't there, we were never just based on acai. We're green tea, we're tropical, we're peanut butter and jelly, and acai. So we always had a very diverse flavor set, and we could be gluten-free, dairy-free, vegan. We don't put stabilizers, no sugars added. So we're still very different than most of the players out there that are pumping it with ice. Basically, it's sorbet with fruit on top. We're a health
Yeah.
food company, and I always viewed ourselves as a health and wellness brand, not just a one layered retail business. So really started it by having college kids, really give me a lot of feedback. Many worked for me for a long time thereafter, but really getting people's feedback, adjusting to the consumer. So when I opened, it was, I was working crazy hours because I was going to make it work. Like I have a personality. If I have to dig ditches, I'll dig ditches. Like it's not, yeah, I would have stayed trading if I wanted like all the excitement and power, but I really knew that I had something here and I wanted to make it work.
Mhm.
So really it was, you know, I I laugh because, you know, I would working so hard in those stores that I would forget where I parked my car. So at like 9 o'clock at night, I was being like, where's the car? I can't remember. And, but I felt the pressure of having to make it work, or I'm mopping the floors and they're like, oh, look at that old guy mopping floors. Like, be careful what you wish for, right? So, but that feedback really was driven by consumers, what they like, what they don't like. And at the time, it's brand spanking new. So people were like, hey, what's this texture? What's this is very different, very exciting, very colorful. Uh,
Mhm.
so it was really a lot of fun, especially in the beginning.
So I know Boulder was on your radar because of, you liked being out west, close to an airport. Was that part timing and luck to say, hey, we happen to be in Boulder, college town, this business idea that I have from, the food I'm giving to my own kids and wanting to do something different. Was that just happenstance that Boulder happens to have a university and that fits the customer demographic, or was that also intentional? Like, hey, I'm going to go to Boulder, there's a college, and I've got this idea that I think college age kids are going to like.
I think a little bit of it. Like I knew Boulder, I knew it was a really interesting entrepreneurial community. That's what drove me there. But I didn't go into it with full intention. Oh, I'm going to open on a campus that's still there right now, like next to the campus. But yes, I was conscious of it. That was one fed into the decision, but it wasn't the guiding principle, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. And so, as you start, like you said, you're a texture guy, you're starting to experiment. Where does one even start? You go from the finance world to now getting into food. I mean, like vastly different. Who are your suppliers? How do you build this out? What equipment do you need? Like, what was that early experience like? Especially, are you Googling things? I mean, this is early-ish internet days. I mean, how do you figure out what to do? Do you find mentors? Do you look online? Do you ask other restaurateurs? How did you attack those early days?
Yeah. So a couple of ways. So I did have this buddy who was doing smoothies. So
That's right.
I got a lot of information on suppliers that way, quite frankly, and he explained a lot. And I will say a couple of really good factors of coming from the finance world and being a trader. A, you're always betting on yourself. B, finance means something. Numbers mean something. So you're always looking into those numbers and making sure there's some sort of, it makes sense, right? That the numbers make sense. You can't just, oh, I'm going to build it, not care about the numbers. There has to be really, there has to be something in there that, hey, if I do this, this, and this, it's going to return X, right? It doesn't have to make money, but at least you got to see the promise for it to do something special. So the suppliers and stuff like that, I figured out by a couple of different ways. My buddy, people I asked in the community, and other, factors like Google. Everyone's looking to increase that business. But I will tell you also being really conservative in my approach helped. So I took a small spot out. It was IQF fruit, so it's all flash frozen fruit. So no real food spoilage. I didn't have a big staff. So I wanted to be fairly conservative to start with and really figure out the nuances of it, and really kind of be able to hang in there for quite a while till I figured it all out. And that was really important. I think if I went, because at the time someone was trying to offer me a much bigger space, and I think it would have cost a lot more. I think it would have been a lot trickier. By doing it the way I did it, incrementally, growing it step by step, worked really well for me. And I was very worried about cost. I was really worried about food waste, cost of goods, and stuff like that. So by having almost zero food waste, it really helped me, low labor. So there was a lot of things I thought about when I was picking the location and picking the food that I wanted to go into that allowed me to really make those decisions that were very helpful early on.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, like you said, anything new, as long as you have that mindset of being a problem solver and figuring it out and surrounding yourself with the right people, I mean, it's possible. One thing I wanted to ask you about is I know, you spent a good bit of time, I think it was, 10 or 12 years in this one location, like really dialing it in. What was that intentional? Was it, hey, this is working so well, I'm fine with one location? Walk me through, I guess, the thought process of hyper focusing on that first location.
Well, yeah, I think I wasn't fine with it. I always wanted bigger, but I really wanted to, I was coming from a very different industry, and this is where I really wanted to understand every aspect I could. And maybe I'm slower than some, but uh, um, I wanted to really understand how to really take advantage of it and go into different regions because I always was thinking as a health and wellness company, I wasn't just thinking of retail store. So in 2009, 2010, we launched a wholesale product line, meaning a line that we went into retail stores with like Whole Foods, Costco, HEB, some of the bigger brands. So all this time, I was trying to figure out in my retail store to get people in and out faster. And then I started freezing some of the bowls. Oh, and then I kind of been working on, hey, how do we mass produce it? How do we do this? And I wanted to get into a different industry too, because right now I'm in, retail, I did wholesale, and I'm in franchising. And other than the Brush Bowl name, those are three dynamically different businesses. So it was really fascinating for me. And on the wholesale business line, which is just a crazy business, I also raised money for that.
Okay.
So I went into and never did that. Right. So, I put a lot of my own money in, but I also had to raise money for that. So there was a lot that went into that. So it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to just sit on the sidelines. I never thought about franchising because, quite frankly, I was really concerned how the business would run because I knew how I would run it. And it's still a challenge for a lot of franchises. How would someone else run the business? Are they going to
Protect that quality in the brand.
But wholesale was really incredible, really interesting world. So we launched basically in 40 states with Whole Foods. Uh,
All at once, or was there a progression? I mean, you're in one 800 square foot shop in Boulder. Was it, hey, we're gonna next year go into 40 states and do wholesale, or what was that transition or progression like?
it was definitely a progression. It didn't like, all right, we're doing all this, but then I had to find a place to mass produce it, and we're even smaller, and that Boulder store is really small. So, mass producing it to spec basically, and then getting it from they work with certain suppliers, certain distributors, sorry, that would distribute to those stores, and working it with UNFI, which was Whole Foods' main distributor, and other distributors that would be delivering it to different places. So it was quite involved. And what I really learned from that is all about distribution. Like I really understood distribution, who delivers what the vulnerabilities, what the opportunities were. And being in Colorado in general, it's a tough distribution place because trucks may drop off, but they're going out empty. Like you want for distribution, you want to be in like Chicago or near major ports to get the food out. Denver's like you have to go up 5,000 feet. There's altitude issues. There's all sorts of challenges. So it's not ideal, but there's plenty of stuff that's produced here. So, and then after doing it and having success and doing many testings, so we would fly to, say, Ohio and do a sampling at a Whole Foods or another brand or another store. And some of it was like, at the time, it was like, what's a mango? Like, or we use organic hemp granola. Oh, am I going to get stoned on this? I'm like, no. Well, no. So really articulating what it was. And we were really first to market on that too. And I did that for many, many years, just kind of all over. And we would send out teams to sample it and try and get the word out. And this is before people really understood bowls, understood
Right.
marketplace.
And
So
do you
that in
think
itself, you never want to be in the teaching business, honestly.
I was gonna ask, I mean, like,
Costly.
you're one of the first, right, to take this category into a wholesale, category. How do you overcome being first? Like, was it a lot of sampling? Was it relationship building? I mean, like, what do you think was that tipping point that got people to sign on? I mean, Whole Foods is no joke, and you get into 40 states. Was a lot of it what you just shared, just the traveling and relationship building and sampling that did it?
People love the product. They tried it. So you had to get in there. The key was getting in their mouth, right? So it wasn't scary. It wasn't, weird. It was just delicious. So getting in people's mouths, even the buyers. So now that world's changed. We have Expo West this week, but that's world changed a lot. And it's harder and harder, and it's consolidation, and Amazon owns.
Competitive.
Yeah. And there's other players trying to do it. But, we had a lot of success, but it was really at a lot of costs because the distributors would buy big buys, but you would have to go on sale at, every quarter. It's how you make money, and excuse me, on that side of the business is on acquisition. Really,
Mhm.
it's a very difficult business in general because the margins on that stuff is very, very low. So you become blocking that shelf. Also, the freezer aisle has a lot of barriers to entry. So when you down the freezer aisle, it's cold, people don't walk down the freezer aisle as much, and there's a door in front of you.
Mhm.
So, and a couple of things we did that were kind of fun, and I love the creative part of it. I'm pretty creative, and that's where I get super excited about. We went black packaging initially, and everyone was like, "It's a black shelf. No one does black packaging. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that." But since no one was doing it,
It
food
stood out.
really stood out. And what is this stuff? And actually, it was really interesting on that side of things. But we plugged and plugged away, and we were growing, 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 and then we hired a co-packer, and we hired multiple co-packers. And then eventually the co-packer that we were using with 12 other brands closed overnight. I heard tons of stuff I couldn't get at. We couldn't get it out. Amazon just acquired Whole Foods. It was a disaster, honestly, for us and 12 other brands. And I ended up pivoting into franchising after meeting a large franchisor, a franchisee who was really selling me on franchising. And it really gave me the ideology to rotate right into franchising. So
Interesting. And so, like, you've alluded to this a little bit, but like you're I think a big thinker. You wanted it to be more than just the one location. Why go wholesale versus, hey, I'm gonna go open a ton of corporate owned, individually owned retail locations? Did the first location do really well and you thought, hey, let's go replicate this? Or what led to, hey, let's mass produce? And did you just look at wholesaling as a way to get more reach quickly and then follow behind with retail? Or
yeah, I think I like the idea. The one thing I know about retail, it's not easy, right? You're very dependent on employees, you're dependent on customer service, hence my fear into franchising a little bit. Wholesale, I could be international,
Yep.
domestic, and roll it out. Like
It's more
and it's
scalable.
something we're re-engaging on some of our stuff now again, on some of our rush bites and some complementary products. Frozen is a little harder than other stuff, but for us, I really have a great deal of knowledge in it, and it was fun. I really I like the different businesses. I like to have my hands in a lot of different things. Um, so it kind of wasn't running just one store. It was running a wholesale business, and now it's running a franchising business. So it's just constantly learning, constantly being challenged. But it's all super exciting stuff and different challenges. Honestly, it's I like creation. That's what I feel I'm really good at, and I like creating and building. And that's where I think my skill set leads. Once it's pretty big, I'm probably not the guy, to be
Yeah.
frankly. So, um,
You and me both. I like the 0 to 10, kind
yeah,
of phase and then have someone else come in. But like you said, wholesale distribution, retail versus franchising, all very different beasts. And for a while, you said you were, again, you were a definitive no on franchising. What ultimately led you to change that? Did you see it as another mechanism to grow the brand? Was it, hey, it's time to get this out into more people's hands outside of a grocery store? What inspired the decision to start franchising?
I think I had preconceived notions of it. And if I set really a incredible foundation, I could build it and build it well. And I think you could lever it much more readily and grow it in a different way. And I would also provide people with a very low cost entry point into a really cool business that may not have had food experience, but are business people, which I was. So I felt that, hey, I know this guy who's really smart, and he's an accountant and he's done with accounting and he really wants to own his own business. Here's a pretty low cost method of getting into it. Doesn't have to give up everything to do it, but here's a low cost way of owning his own business on top of it. So that's how I viewed the business and the opportunity. And talking to this guy that had a franchisee of a lot of stores, he also convinced me that, hey, franchising can be really interesting, fun, and you could really grow quickly with it. I tell you what it really impacted was most people that start franchising, they do super regional. Like they'll stay within one region. Since at the time it was pretty known as doing bowls, or they were just starting to do bowls, I looked at it as I understood national distribution, that I could open up on a national level and try to beat people to the different areas and be there first. So if I was starting a business, everyone would say, oh, worry about your regional market. I was thinking bigger. I was like, I don't want to just worry about regional. I want to be, national. And even to this day, we're in 25 states. So that's not generally the plan for most people initially. But how I viewed it was I wanted to put stakes in the ground in a lot of different places and then grow within those communities. It's much harder, but I understood distribution. I understood food costs. To this day, we're probably one of the lowest food costs for franchisees because I focus so much on the numbers. And even much bigger brands come to us and they even ask me, how do you do this? And I'm like, well, you're a competitor. I'm not going to tell you. And our ingredients are much better. So like, I'm not greedy to the franchisees. Their success is our success. So we do a lot of things that other companies wouldn't do, especially private equity. They going to spin and add it in 2 or 3 years. But for us, I go off a lot of times, even though legally I could go off a gross, I go off a net on most items just because I want them encouraging, specials and everything else. I make no money on food or equipment. Legally, I can't. I choose not to because I'm not going to do that until we're at a scale that's going to really, really, really give the franchisees the advantage on it.
Yeah, we were the same way. I agree. We were the same way. We built a franchise laundromat business, before I started working on Franzi. And out of the gate, people are like, oh, you could take, you get such a massive discount on equipment. You get 40%, whatever it is, discount on equipment. You could give the franchisees 30 and take that 10%, delta and use that as profit. We were like, no, we want every bit of discount going to the franchisee because if they are successful, we are successful. And over time, it should be this win-win-win situation where the pricing that we get to a franchisee is so much lower because they're a franchisee than going on their own, that they're ecstatic, and then maybe we can take a little bit of it so that everyone is still better off, and we can use that revenue that we generate to reinvest back into the business. But early on, the best use of that capital is putting it into the franchisees' pockets so that they can reinvest locally and into their box and improve their unit economics. I agree. It's at first you don't want to get greedy or too cute. It's put every bit of value you can back into the system. And when you're more mature and stable, then you can start to look at some of these win scenarios that still benefit everyone involved.
And it's hard enough, right? So like the Quiznos stores, they were making more money on the food they were selling than their own royalties, right? Yeah. There's a lot of brands that do that. I know there's a competitor of ours that's 40% cost of goods. They sell it to the franchisees and it's all sugar and water and flavoring. Like, we don't do any of that. Our pure cost of goods would be, should be 10 times higher, yet we're significantly lower. So, that was really, really important for our success. But looking at it on a national level opposed to a regional out now, I would say it's much, much harder to do it that way. You have to have the standards in place. You have to train people, whether it's in Boise or Massachusetts or wherever it may be, Texas, we have stores in all through California. You have to make sure everyone's on the same page. You're making the product well. And our product is, it's not a sorbet they're scooping out. That's just junk. It's blended fruit and vegetables and whatever base. So you're making it to order, whether you're gluten-free, dairy-free, vegan. So it's a little more touchy-feely, basically, with getting the product, the quality and everything else appropriate for a consumer. It's much harder than just scooping something and throwing it in a container. And with the diversity of flavors and everything else and fruits and vegetables, it gives us better tasting product, but it's harder to, certainly make within the store.
Yeah, I want to talk about the product and the bowl a bit because it's clear you've been very thoughtful about this. You're really making a concerted effort to have high quality, healthy, not all these sugars or additives or, and you mentioned texture earlier a lot. Is there anything about it being, framed as or positioned as a meal and not just a snack? Is that something that's intentional because, hey, like this is, calorie dense, it's healthy, this can be, treated as a whole lunch or a whole meal, or is it also part of a business positioning, for it to be a meal versus a snack?
So it is a meal. Our biggest time of sales during the day is noon.
Okay.
So we're also 16 ounces. We're much bigger than the other players out there. And part of that reason is when you're putting in fruits and vegetables, you need a certain volume for it to blend well, right? So with all the fruit we put in, so it's very hard to do small sizes, or you can split them, but it's hard to do small sizes. So we view ourselves and just view the line in general as a meal. So our competitors are, let's just say McDonald's, Burger King, whatever it may be, Subway, someone who's going to come in that has a health focus, wants something really healthy and delicious, filling. You don't get that sugar high and low. So we get tons of Olympic athletes in our stores, professional athletes, unsolicited. Like we had the Denver Nuggets, they order in all the time. And the guy was sitting on the podium the year they won the NBA championship, and he's sitting with a Rush Bowl there. We didn't. They used to that's what it was like eating. Right. That's the nutrition, the food that they were getting. And even with a lot of different brands out there, we're front forward with our nutritional value. We're much lower calorie than most of the competitors out there just because we don't put sugar in our product. And one cool thing we do is we grind our own peanut butter. So we do unsalted granulated peanuts. We grind in front of you or when you order it, and we make our own jam, and we use chia seeds as thickener, and a peanut butter and jelly bowls. Awesome. It's really, really delicious and very popular with a lot of people.
You don't have a location in Charlotte, do you?
We actually just signed a franchisee. We will soon.
All right, then I get to try. That's where I'm based, so you're making me hungry, and this sounds awesome. So I haven't actually had the product yet, and I want to try it now. I know you also have this zero air standard. So you have a strict no sorbet ban, no pre-made scoops, no stabilizers, and zero air. What's the science, behind that? Or is that a culinary decision? Why just walk me through, what you've learned there and why that's so important?
Well, quality matters to me. It's certainly, I could lower cost of goods by having all those things realistically, but we're a high quality organization. And I think the consumer is really smart and they figure that stuff out. And I stick to the guns on that. We've always been that way. And as we view ourselves as a health and wellness brand, I would feel I'd be selling the brand short if I had these low quality ingredients. And it's really important to me that we stay on those type of standards.
And how did you and again, how did you learn some of that? Was that from your, friend that was in the smoothie business, or was this trial and error, or did you hire food
Trial and error
scientists
on
or
that. I always wanted to, again, we're health and wellness. I didn't want to make a quick buck. I wouldn't have done that. I would have not done this business. But, I wanted to be true to the concept, true to the business, true of who we are, and true to the consumers. I don't want to fool consumers. I want them to really feel great about what they're eating. And it's really funny because when consumers that are used to that really sugary stuff come and try our product, they can't deal with the sugary stuff anymore. So with sugar being pumped into the system every day, or corn syrup or whatever junk they're putting in, when they try the real stuff, they really love the real stuff. And then when they try the sugar stuff, they can't take it anymore. So if I can do anything to help people eat well and really enjoy the product, that's my objective.
you mentioned you had a bunch of, and you're in Boulder, there's a ton of high endurance athletes, there's, like the Nuggets, there's Olympic athletes training there. How much has that group, this athletic group, how much have they influenced or shaped the menu? Do they come in? Do they give you feedback? Do they ask for certain things? Or is this you experimenting and seeing what sells more, and that's how you're getting the feedback?
I learned early on because we have one bowl that I was like, I don't like this at all, at all. And they didn't want to do it. And 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 the consumers said, "Oh, we tested it out. Oh, I really like it, really like it, really like it." It's like one of our fourth or fifth biggest seller. So, hey,
Wow.
you gotta listen to the consumer, right?
Yep.
It's great that you have an opinion, but like everything else, numbers don't lie.
Mhm.
You gotta really understand your consumer and see what sells behind it. So I was always talking to consumers, whether they're Olympic athletes or not. Like everyone has a place at Rush, right? So
Mhm.
it's really about caring about what you're eating and feeling good about it. That's why, we love the color. We're a very colorful product, but that's colors come from the fruits or the algae that you're eating, or the peanut butter or the acai. So those are real colors. So we really love that fact of how colorful it is and how delicious it is. So we take everything into perspective with talking to the customers, but also want something that's cheerful, happy, and tastes awesome. That's really our focus without being too cute.
I mean, that's a really important piece of advice. The customer at the end of the day is going to let you know what they want by their actions, right? Whether they buy or not, or buy additional things or add-ons. It's if they want it or not. And too often, I think entrepreneurs or business owners get almost stubborn. They think like, well, I think this way, so everyone else must think this way, and that's how they'll buy and behave. And you just gave a perfect example of a bowl that didn't meet your specific, palate or taste profile, but it's your fourth or fifth largest seller, and who would have thought, or you wouldn't have ever thought potentially, and the market spoke and you listened, and instead of, you know,
I,
being
I'll
stubborn and
tell you
saying, "Hey, I don't like it, I'm getting rid of it."
I'll tell you what else I learned early on. So I'm pretty adventuresome in terms of I like trying different things. I would say most people are more creatures of habit. So they want their beach bowl at 8:15 a.m. made a particular way. When how my brain works, which is different, is I'm trying different things. I'm going to different places. People are very, very structured in exactly what they want when they want it. And that's not how my brain works, but that's how most people's brains work. I'm the outlier. So it's also making sure, A, we're prepped for Susan who's coming in at that particular time. We're engaging her with her particular product. We know what she wants, when she wants it, and really having that interface with the consumer. So that's really, really important. And that's very different than my mentality. Not that being good to a consumer is not, but is always something I am. But being at 8:15 sharp, I need my bowl with this. I would try a million different things. So that's something I've learned early on that most people really are more structured and really like things and over try the same thing.
Now that you mention it, I think about myself throughout the day, and there's definitely certain restaurants, lunch places I'll go to, and I get the same thing. Like I like trying new things if I'm traveling and I'm in a new city or country, and but once you're in your normal paths of life, it's easy to be like, all right, I don't want to make more, especially as a business owner or entrepreneur, like I don't want to make more decisions than I have to already today. So it's like, I'm just going to line up. Yeah. This is where I'm going to go at lunch. I'm going to get the same, item I always get, and I don't have to think about it. But I didn't think about it from a business owner perspective on how many people probably operate that way, that are creatures of habit, and, are trying to just kind of get on to the next thing, and they know what they like and they're going to order it.
And that's what's scary about franchise, is up to you to ruin that relationship. So you always have to, and you have a lot of different employees. So everyone has to be really, really engaged. And one thing also we did is I built a infrastructure that is really strong. Like every call that we've had is on a portal. Every marketing asset's on a portal. Construction diagrams, everything's on this portal. So everyone can go to within our network to pull or go back and see from any particular time. So we always invested really heavily into infrastructure, probably over invested into infrastructure, but I felt that if you really want to build a really strong foundation for a launch down the line to much bigger growth, I wanted to make sure that we were built on very, very solid ground that would be able to support the system, whether it's 10 stores or 1,000. Well, certainly in the franchising world, you have to bet on yourself also, right? Like you see success and you see failure all the time. I never focus on failure.
Mhm.
I always focus on telling me, like we started with the conversation, telling me there's a problem, get in line. Like there's always a problem. I only care about solutions.
Yep.
So I'm really driven on solutions and and gearing up for the next thing, whatever that may be, right? We just launched a A-list smoothie line, which were really cool and beautiful and really tasty. So what's the next thing, right? So always kind of focus on the future, but also have a really solid base in the past, knowing your numbers. Like
Mhm.
I understand the numbers cold. It's not, hey, I'll build it and the customers will come, or I'm going to spend all X, Y, and Z. I think a lot of times I take a conservative approach to things, and that's worked out well for me. Not always. Sometimes it's good to go shoot for the fences, but um, I I I I started small. I didn't just go crazy and thinking I'm going to change the world overnight. It's really hard to do. It's really, really hard to do it slowly, but it's really, really almost impossible to do it quickly.
Yep.
Also, food is tough. Like, there's other businesses that are easier to get into, but food is reliable, right? Is
Mhm.
steady. Everyone needs food. So when you look at tech and other stuff, you may be lucky with tech. Who knows how AI is going to transform that?
Right.
A lot of people losing jobs with AI,
Mhm.
um, but you're not going to be losing jobs with food because people need to eat.
Yep. I love that. It's honestly a huge driver behind what we're doing. Is our thought is, business ownership, franchising, whether it's food or home services or fitness, it's a hedge against AI. I mean, robotics will come eventually, but if you're the owner of that business, it's a tool that you can use, not a tool that will replace you necessarily. And so I completely agree with you that, being and doing something in the physical world is a competitive advantage and is a hedge against the AI in and of itself. One other question I wanted to ask you, and then we'll wrap up with some kind of quick hitter questions is, you said that you're, quick to, almost kick out operators from the system who cut corners, who think this is a get rich quick thing. But are there any, green flags you look for in a person that really tell you if they have the grit to handle, the Rush Bowl standard, the Rush Bowl standard? Is there a personality trait or a character trait that you really look for?
Yeah, and I've learned that honestly. So it takes time to figure that out into the community, whether they can do it or wants the partner or their employee, but being involved in the community is a huge, huge part of the success of a particular franchisee.
Mhm.
Caring about the community, being in the community, just sitting back and kind of saying, "Hey, here's a Rush Bowl." I don't want that franchisee. I want the one that's really engaged, wants to be part of the community, tries to be part of the community, and has some presence there, especially in the beginning. Some of these companies say, oh, absentee. We don't say, oh, absentee. I want a presence at some point. It doesn't have to be every day. It doesn't have to be every other day, but you want a presence there because you want to engage with the consumer. You want to get an understanding of, hey, this is what we're doing and why we're making a difference. Why do we care? All those things are really important to us. And that's what we look for in our franchisees. And listen, not everyone, they could interview well, but they don't want to do it. Or they kind of come across reserved, quiet. I'm more of an introvert. I get it. But they get out there and they're awesome. So it's really hard to figure out. I think we're getting better and better at it. And it's even more and more exciting for us.
Yep. So community driven. I agree, especially if you're, working in this space where there are a lot of options. Why does someone want to support you, and how do they, get educated that your product is superior? And I think you have to be embedded and involved in the community in order to do that. Just to start to wrap up with some quick hitter type questions.
Sure.
There, questions centered around, learnings, how you'd summarize the brand, et cetera. And the first one I have is there one clear mistake that's the most expensive mistake new owners often make in month one?
Bigger isn't better. So, and maybe it's, for us, I focus a lot on the real estate and this and that. So they fall in love with a particular spot that's really big, way bigger than they need. Don't fall in love with anything. It's like buying a house, right? Like, your location is really important, but your ultimate success is not going to be driven by just location. So smaller, really understand the finances of it. I think that's one of the early mistakes people make, and they fall in love with one location or one spot. And if they lose it or don't get it, or it's way too big, they still really, oh, I want this. And sometimes you really got to think through the numbers. That's where the numbers come into play, right? You're paying double the rent because you're getting twice the size you need. I'm about efficiency, in, out, credible customer experience, very pretty store, but you're not going to hang out there all day. So really having that mindset is really important. And a lot of people make that mistake. They fall in love with something and they lose the rationality of it a little bit. And I do my best to help them with that.
Yeah, they're called fixed costs for a reason. Once they're there, they're fixed, and it's hard to move them. So you got to get that first part right. If you had to describe Rush Bowl in 3 words, how would you describe it?
All right. I would say delicious, healthy, and colorful, maybe.
I like it. Again, every time you've described the product, it's made me hungry. It's around lunchtime. It's 12:45, and I haven't eaten yet. And so I'm like, oh, I wish there was one here, but it sounds like there will be soon.
Yeah, very soon.
And then the last question I have for you, I have 2 more. The second to last one is, how do you define a win now compared to when you first started?
Well, I think the same thing. Your goals are higher, right? Like, your objectives are higher. So even a sales day, right, for the network, we just, had a sales day, was the highest we've had pretty much ever. So that's a big win for the network. Even though we're growing, you look at on a store level and everything else, those are big wins for us on a kind of a bigger scale. And just like the PR we're getting unconditionally, right? Like the love we're getting in the community, that's a win for us when we're not out there pushing it, right? So that's just people loving the product. And that's probably the funnest part of it too.
That's really cool. And the last question I have is, are you happier now doing Rush Bowls than you were before working in New York in finance?
It depends day to day, if you want to. Yeah, I think, to say it's less work is not the case, right? I worked really hard on both. I think I own this, and I'm one of the few. I actually own it. I'm not private equity. I financed the whole thing. I own the business, so I care a lot more than other entities out there that might be. Most of them are private equity or driven by private equity, so it's very personal to me, and that's why I really focus on the business and I'm all in on it, but it's much more stressful. So I think I'm definitely happier and it's mine, right? Opposed to I'm working for a big corporation. Now I worked in banking forever, and I will tell you, I was lucky. I was never laid off, but a lot of people are, and it's impersonal, and companies are cutting people right now. I know of a bunch, and no one really cares about it. So when you own your own business, it's yours, and that's something, whether it's a franchise system or not, it's still your business. And I think that inherently makes people a lot happier. And we're really one of the lowest costs to get into within food. So one of the things I'm really proud about is their easy entry into it, especially in Rush Bowl's case. So you can pivot and have a lot of success with that. One thing also, which you can appreciate more than most, is I had no idea some of the tax advantages of owning a small business. And I just had no idea. Not that, the economy is driven on small business. Like, now, small business is a broad term. It could be, I think, up to like 60,000 people is considered small business. There's in finance, it's really pays to be in a small business, I think. So.
Yep. I agree. Anything else before we wrap up that you want to leave with the audience? Where can they, find you, Rush Bowls, on Instagram or the website? Is there anywhere that you want to send people, or any last, kind of parting words you want to leave the audience with?
I know what you're eating. So most certainly we broadcast out our food. It's rushbowls.com. You can go to our website. If you want a franchise, all the information is there and we can put you in touch. We're on all social media. So we're on Instagram, LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, TikTok, whatever it is. I'm sure we're there. And I always love talking to people. So if you have any questions or anything else, I'm happy to talk to you or talk to our staff here. We're based in Colorado. So, come try the product. We're in 25 states. So.
That's awesome. Andrew, thank you again so much for sharing your story, your wisdom, some of the advice, the passion behind the product especially got me excited. So let me know when you're in Charlotte or when the grand opening is going to be, and I'll be there. I'll be one of the first customers, and just thank you again for coming on.
I really appreciate you having me. It's always wonderful to be able to do this, and thanks again for everything.
Awesome. Take care, Andrew.